The blood-red sun sank beneath the rugged horizon as Virginia Zeller ran barefoot across the unforgiving terrain, her once pristine blue dress now hanging in tatters around her trembling frame. Every step sent shards of pain shooting through her feet, but the fear pulsing through her veins pushed her forward, away from the nightmare she'd barely escaped. The year was 1876, and the promise of a new life in the Montana Territory had turned into a desperate fight for survival. Virginia had arrived just 3 weeks prior from Philadelphia, accepting a position as a schoolteacher in the growing settlement of Silverrock. Her employer, the town's mayor, had shown his true colors that evening when he cornered her in the schoolhouse after hours, his intentions far from honorable. The struggle had left her dress torn, her shoes abandoned in the scuffle, and her heart racing with terror as she fled into the wilderness. Now, with nothing but the vast expanse of Montana's untamed landscape stretching before her, Virginia stumbled onward, knowing that stopping meant certain death either from the elements or from the men who might be pursuing her. Miles away, Beau Pearson sat beside a small campfire, his weathered hands cradling a tin cup of coffee. At 28, he'd spent more than half his life in the saddle, working cattle drives and taking odd jobs across the frontier. The life of a cowboy suited him uncomplicated and free from the constraints of polite society. His current job had him tracking a herd of wild horses for a rancher in Helena who was looking to expand his stable. Beau's loyal paint horse, Domino, suddenly lifted his head. Ears perked forward toward the eastern ridge. Years of surviving in harsh conditions had taught Beau to trust his horse's instincts. He set down his coffee and reached for the Winchester rifle resting against his saddle. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, scanning the darkening landscape. A sound carried on the evening breeze, not the howl of a coyote or the rustle of wildlife, but something distinctly human. A cry, perhaps, or a whimper of pain. Virginia collapsed against a boulder, her legs finally giving out after hours of desperate flight. Her lungs burned with each ragged breath, and her bare feet left bloody prints on the stony ground. Thirst clawed at her throat, and the temperature was dropping rapidly as night descended fully across the land. She huddled against the rock, trying to preserve what little warmth remained in her body. Her thoughts drifted to her family back east, her aging parents who had reluctantly blessed her journey west, her younger siblings who had cried at her departure. Would they ever learn what happened to her? Or would she simply become another name on the long list of those who had vanished in the vastness of the frontier? The sound of approaching hoofbeats jolted her from her thoughts. Terror seized her heart. Had the mayor's men found her already? With no strength left to run, Virginia pressed herself against the boulder, making herself as small as possible. The hoofbeats slowed, then stopped altogether. She heard the creak of leather as someone dismounted. "Hello?" a man's voice called out, deep but not threatening. "Is someone there?" Virginia remained silent, tears streaming down her face. "I mean, no harm," the voice continued. Heard what sounded like someone in trouble. Footsteps crunched on the rocky ground, drawing nearer. A match flared in the darkness, illuminating the face of a tall man with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' worth of stubble. His eyes, catching the light of the match, showed concern rather than malice. "Sweet Jesus," he muttered when he spotted her huddled form. "Madam, are you hurt?" Virginia couldn't find her voice, could only stare up at him with wide, frightened eyes. Beau Pearson had seen his share of hardship on the frontier, but the sight of the young woman barefoot, dress torn, eyes wild with fear, stirred something deep within him. He moved slowly, carefully, as he might approach a wounded animal. "My name's Beau," he said gently. "Beau Pearson. I've got a camp not far from here. Food, water, and a fire. You look like you could use all three." Virginia's parched lips parted, her voice barely a whisper. "How do I know I can trust you?" Beau knelt a respectful distance away. "You don't, but you'll die out here alone, and that's certain." He removed his coat and offered it to her. "Take this at least. Night gets bitter cold in these parts." The simple kindness, more than the logic of his words, broke through Virginia's fear. She reached out with trembling fingers and accepted the coat. "What's your name?" Beau asked as she wrapped the garment around her shoulders. "Virginia," she replied hoarsely. "Virginia Zeller." Well, Miss Zeller, I'd say you're a long way from anywhere a lady ought to be at this hour. His tone wasn't accusatory, merely stating a fact. Can you walk? My horse is just over yonder. Virginia tried to stand but winced as her feet touched the ground. Without hesitation, Beau stepped forward and lifted her into his arms. She stiffened at first, then relaxed slightly, too exhausted to resist. I'll take you to my camp, he said. Get some food in you, tend to those feet. Tomorrow we can figure out where you're headed. Away, she whispered against his shoulder. Just away. Beau carried her to where Domino waited patiently, then carefully mounted with Virginia held securely in front of him. As they rode through the moonlit landscape, he couldn't help but wonder what had driven this clearly educated woman to flee into the wilderness unprepared and unprotected. Whatever or whoever it was, his instincts told him she had good reason to be afraid. At his campsite, Beau settled Virginia near the fire, which he quickly built back up to a comforting blaze. He offered her water first, cautioning her to drink slowly, then set about preparing a simple meal of beans and salt pork from his provisions. As the warmth from the fire and the first few sips of water revived her, Virginia became more aware of her surroundings and her situation. She was alone in the wilderness with a stranger, a man whose kindness might be genuine or might be a prelude to something sinister. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. Beau looked up from the small pot he was stirring. "My ma raised me to help folks in need. Don't need much more reason than that. There are many who wouldn't stop for a woman alone." "There are," he agreed, "and there are many who would take advantage. I'm not one of them." He spooned some beans onto a tin plate and handed it to her. "Eat. It's not fancy, but it'll keep you alive." Virginia accepted the plate, suddenly aware of her gnawing hunger. As she ate, Beau rummaged in his saddlebags and produced a small medical kit. "May I see to your feet?" he asked, keeping his distance until she nodded permission. With gentle hands that belied his rugged appearance, Beau cleaned the cuts and scrapes on her feet, applying a salve that stung at first, but soon brought relief. His touch was clinical, respectful. Nothing like the pawing hands of Mayor Thornton that she had fought off hours earlier. "You're running from someone," Beau said quietly as he worked. It wasn't a question. Virginia stared into the dancing flames. "Yes." "Man trouble?" She nodded, throat tight. "Husband?" Beau asked, voice carefully neutral. "No," Virginia replied quickly. "The mayor of Silverrock. He tried to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Beau's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "No need to explain further. You're safe now." He finished bandaging her feet and moved back to his side of the fire. "Get some rest, Miss Zeller. I'll keep watch." Virginia, despite her lingering wariness, found herself trusting this quiet cowboy with the gentle hands and respectful demeanor. She wrapped herself more tightly in his coat and lay down on the bedroll he'd prepared for her. "Mr. Pearson," she murmured as sleep began to claim her. "Yes?" "Thank you." Beau watched as she drifted into exhausted slumber, her features softening in the firelight. Something protective stirred within him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, not since losing his younger sister to fever back in '69. He added more wood to the fire and settled in for a long night's vigil, his rifle across his lap, and his eyes scanning the darkness beyond their small circle of light. Morning broke clear and cold across the Montana wilderness. Virginia awoke disoriented, momentarily panicked until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She found Beau already awake, brewing coffee over a fresh fire. "Morning," he said, offering her a steaming cup. "How are the feet?" Virginia gingerly tested her weight on them. "Painful, but better than yesterday." "Good. I've been thinking about your situation." Beau poured himself coffee and sat across from her. "Silverrock is 2 days' ride east. Mayor there is Walter Thornton, if I recall correctly." Virginia flinched at the name, and Beau nodded grimly. "Thought so. Man's got a reputation even out here. Not a good one." "I didn't know," Virginia said softly. "The advertisement for a school teacher seemed legitimate. I had references from respectable families in Philadelphia." "No doubt it was legitimate. Silverrock's growing fast, needs a proper school." Beau sipped his coffee. "But Thornton's the type to think any unattached woman is fair game, especially one from back east." "What am I to do now?" Virginia asked, a tremor in her voice. I have no money, no possessions except what I'm wearing. I can't return to Silverrock, and I haven't the means to travel elsewhere. Beau considered her predicament. I'm headed to Helena. Rancher there named Whitcomb hired me to track some Mustangs. It's honest work, and Helena's a proper city larger than Silverrock, with law that actually means something. He paused. You'd be welcome to ride along if you're willing. Might be able to find work there teaching. Virginia studied him, searching for any hint of ulterior motive, but found only straightforward concern in his weathered face. Why would you go to such trouble for a stranger? She asked. Beau shrugged. Way I see it, folks out here have to look out for one another. Wilderness doesn't care much whether we live or die. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Besides, been riding alone too long. Conversation might be a welcome change. Despite her situation, Virginia found herself returning his smile. I accept your offer, Mr. Pearson. And I promise I'll find a way to repay your kindness once we reach Helena. No repayment needed, he replied, standing to begin breaking camp. But we should get moving. It's 3 days to Helena if the weather holds. As Beau efficiently packed their meager belongings, Virginia attempted to make herself more presentable. She used a bit of water to wash her face and hands, then tried to smooth her torn dress into some semblance of decency. Noticing her discomfort, Beau hesitated before reaching into his pack. I've got a spare shirt and trousers, not proper ladies' wear by any stretch, but might be more practical for riding. He offered the bundle to her, then tactfully turned his back to give her privacy. Virginia held the clothing, momentarily scandalized at the thought of wearing men's attire. But practicality quickly overrode convention. Her dress was beyond salvaging, and the thought of riding side saddle in her current state was impractical at best. Thank you, she said, quickly changing behind a large boulder. The clothing was far too large, but with the sleeves rolled up and the trousers secured with a piece of rope, she felt more properly covered than she had in her tattered dress. When Beau turned back, his eyes widened slightly, but he made no comment beyond a brief nod of approval. He helped her onto Domino, then mounted behind her. The closeness was unavoidable, but not uncomfortable, his presence solid and reassuring at her back. They rode west, following game trails through the rugged terrain. Beau proved to be quietly knowledgeable about the land, pointing out edible plants and signs of wildlife as they traveled. By midday, Virginia found herself relaxing in his company, the terror of the previous day receding slightly with each mile that separated her from Silverrock. Have you always been a cowboy? She asked during a brief stop to rest the horse. Since I was 15, Beau replied. Left home in Missouri after my pa died. Ma had remarried, and my stepfather and I didn't see eye to eye. His expression suggested there was more to the story, but he didn't elaborate. Worked cattle drives mostly, some ranch work. Last few years I've been doing odd jobs, breaking horses, tracking, guiding folks who don't know the territory. It sounds lonely, Virginia observed. Beau considered this. It can be, but there's a kind of peace in it too. No one to answer to but yourself and the land. He glanced at her. What about you? Teaching seems a far cry from Philadelphia society. Virginia sighed. My family was never part of high society. Father was a clerk in a shipping office. Mother took in sewing. They managed to educate us children, but when Father's health began to fail, I needed to find work. She twisted a loose thread from Beau's shirt around her finger. Teaching positions for women are limited in the East, but out west, they're desperate for anyone with an education. So you answered an advertisement, Beau said. Yes, the salary was generous enough to send money home to help my parents. Her voice faltered. Now, I don't know what I'll do. Beau mounted Domino again, reaching down to help Virginia up. First thing is getting you to Helena safely, one step at a time. They rode until dusk, making good progress despite sharing a single horse. Beau found a sheltered spot near a small stream for their camp, and Virginia insisted on helping prepare their simple meal. As they ate, the vast canopy of stars emerged overhead, more brilliant than anything Virginia had ever seen in Philadelphia. It's beautiful, she whispered, gazing upward. One of the rewards of this life, Beau agreed, makes up for a lot of the hardship. The night air grew colder, and Virginia moved closer to the fire, pulling Beau's coat tightly around her shoulders. Beau noticed her shivering and hesitated before speaking. "It's going to be colder tonight," he said carefully. "Might be best if we share the blankets. For warmth," he added quickly. "I'll keep a proper distance." Virginia felt her cheeks flush, but practicality again won out over propriety. She nodded her agreement. They arranged their bedrolls close to each other, with the fire at their feet. True to his word, Beau kept a respectful distance, though the shared warmth beneath the blankets was undeniable. Virginia lay awake for some time, listening to the night sounds of the wilderness and the steady breathing of the man beside her. In Philadelphia, such an arrangement would have been scandalous beyond measure. But here, in the vastness of the frontier, different rules applied. Survival took precedence over social niceties, and Virginia was beginning to understand the freedom that came with that shift in perspective. She turned her head to study Beau's profile in the dying firelight, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows, even in sleep. He was handsome in a rugged way. Nothing like the polished gentleman she had known back east. There was an authenticity to him that she found increasingly compelling. With that unsettling thought, Virginia closed her eyes and eventually drifted into dreamless sleep. The second day of travel brought them into more challenging terrain, steep ridges and narrow passes that required them to dismount and lead Domino through the most treacherous sections. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, promising an approaching storm. "We need to find shelter," Beau said, eyeing the sky with concern. "Storms move fast in these mountains, can turn deadly in minutes." He led them toward a stand of pine trees where the ground rose into a rocky outcropping. As the first fat raindrops began to fall, Beau spotted what he was looking for, a shallow cave cut into the hillside, just large enough for 2 people and a horse. They reached the shelter just as the heavens opened, rain coming down in blinding sheets. Inside the cave, Beau quickly gathered what dry wood he could find nearby and started a small fire near the entrance, where the smoke could escape without suffocating them. "Good timing," Virginia remarked, wringing water from her hair. "Been caught in enough mountain storms to know better than to dawdle," Beau replied with a slight smile. He unsaddled Domino and rubbed the horse down with a cloth from his pack. "We'll wait it out here. Might be stuck until morning if it doesn't let up soon." The close confines of the cave made their previous sleeping arrangement seem spacious by comparison. Virginia sat with her back against the rock wall, watching Beau care for his horse with practiced movements. There was something deeply comforting about his quiet competence, his ability to navigate this harsh environment with such ease. "How did you learn all this?" she asked. "Surviving out here, I mean." Beau shrugged. "Trial and error, mostly. Made plenty of mistakes early on. Nearly died a few times before I learned to read the land properly." He finished with Domino and sat down across from Virginia, the small fire between them. "Had some help, too. Old trapper named Harlan took me under his wing for a spell. Taught me things you don't learn driving cattle. You make it sound simple. It's not, but it's honest." Beau fed another stick to the fire. "Out here, the land doesn't lie to you. It's harsh, but it's fair. Treat it with respect, and it usually returns the favor." "Unlike people," Virginia said softly. Beau's eyes met hers across the flames. "Some people, not all." Thunder crashed outside, making Virginia jump. The storm intensified, rain driving horizontally past the cave entrance, occasional flashes of lightning illuminating the landscape in stark white bursts. "Will we be safe here?" Virginia asked. "Safe as anywhere," Beau assured her. "Caves high enough to avoid flooding, and the lightning's more likely to hit the taller pines than our little hideaway." As if to test his words, a tremendous crack split the air, followed by the splintering crash of a tree not far from their shelter. Virginia gasped, instinctively moving closer to Beau. "Just a tree," he said calmly, though his arm came around her shoulders in a protective gesture that seemed as natural as breathing. Virginia knew she should move away, maintain the proper distance between them, but the warmth of his body against the damp chill of the cave was too comforting to resist. They sat in silence as the storm raged, his arm steady around her shoulders, her head eventually coming to rest against his chest. "Tell me about Philadelphia," Beau said after a while, his voice a low rumble she could feel as well as hear. Virginia closed her eyes, conjuring images of the city she'd left behind. It's noisy, always moving, always busy. Carriages on cobblestone streets, factory whistles, vendors calling their wares. Nothing like this silence. She gestured toward the wilderness beyond their shelter. Miss it? Beau asked. Parts of it, she admitted. The libraries, theater, music. She smiled faintly. Hot baths. Beau chuckled. Can't argue with that last one. But there are things I don't miss, Virginia continued. The soot and smoke, the crowding, the constant pressure to appear a certain way, act a certain way. She sighed. Sometimes it felt like wearing a mask that grew heavier each day. No masks out here, Beau observed. Land doesn't care about appearances. No, Virginia agreed. I'm beginning to see the appeal of that. She looked up at him. What about you? Have you ever lived in a city? Beau shook his head. St. Louis is the biggest place I've been. Couldn't breathe right there. Too many people. Too many walls. His fingers absently traced patterns on her shoulder. I need open sky above me to feel truly alive. The intimacy of their position suddenly struck Virginia, and she straightened slightly, though she didn't pull away entirely. Beau seemed to sense her hesitation and loosened his arm, allowing her to establish her own space. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Didn't mean to presume. No, Virginia said quickly. I'm not. She took a breath. I'm not accustomed to this kind of closeness with anyone. Beau nodded, understanding in his eyes. No expectations, Miss Zeller. You have my word. The formality of Miss Zeller felt suddenly wrong after all they'd shared. Virginia, she corrected. Please call me Virginia. A smile touched the corners of his mouth. Virginia, then. The storm continued through the night, keeping them confined to the small cave. They shared a meager dinner of jerky and dried fruit from Beau's provisions, then prepared to sleep as best they could in the limited space. Take my bedroll, Beau offered. I'll use the saddle blanket. Virginia shook her head. We can share again. It's cold, and there's no sense in you being uncomfortable when... She faltered, then finished simply, when we can both be warm. Beau studied her face for a moment, then nodded. They arranged the bedroll and blankets as comfortably as possible, then lay down together, closer than the night before, but still maintaining a sliver of space between them. Sleep proved elusive for Virginia, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. In just 2 days, this man had shown her more kindness and respect than most she had known throughout her life. There was an integrity to him that transcended social conventions, a fundamental goodness that made her feel safe despite their unorthodox circumstances. And beyond that, there was something else, an attraction she could no longer deny, even to herself. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, noticing the way the sun had burnished his skin to a deep bronze, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled. It was madness, of course. She barely knew him. They came from different worlds, led different lives. Once they reached Helena, they would likely go their separate ways. And yet, the storm gradually subsided, giving way to the deep stillness of a wilderness night. In that quiet darkness, Virginia made a decision. She turned toward Beau, her hand tentatively reaching out to touch his arm. Beau, she whispered. He was awake instantly, years of frontier living having taught him to sleep lightly. What is it? Storms passed. I know. Virginia took a deep breath. I just wanted to say thank you for everything. In the dim glow of the dying fire, she could see his features soften. No need for thanks. There is, she insisted. You saved my life. You've treated me with nothing but respect. I want you to know that She hesitated, then continued. I'm glad it was you who found me. Beau's hand came up to gently touch her cheek, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. So am I, he said softly. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibility. Then, with a courage born of the wilderness that was changing her by the hour, Virginia leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, questioning. Beau responded with equal gentleness, his hand cradling her face as if she were something infinitely precious. When they parted, Virginia felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the fire or the blankets. We should sleep, Beau murmured, though his eyes told a different story. Virginia nodded, settling back beside him, closer now, her head resting in the hollow of his shoulder. His arm came around her, holding her securely against the wilderness night. Morning brought clear skies and a new sense of clarity for Virginia. The kiss had changed something between them, crossed a boundary that could not be uncrossed. As they prepared to continue their journey, there was an awareness in every glance, every casual touch, as they packed up their small camp. "We should reach Helena by nightfall if the trails aren't washed out," Beau said as he saddled Domino. "Town's grown considerably since I was last there. Should be opportunities for someone with your education." Virginia nodded, trying not to think about what would happen once they reached civilization. Would this connection between them survive in a proper town, with proper rules and expectations? Or was it merely a product of their extraordinary circumstances? They rode in comfortable silence through the morning, the landscape gradually changing as they descended from the higher elevations. By midday, they had reached a well-traveled road that would lead them directly to Helena. "Beau," Virginia said suddenly, "what will happen when we reach town?" He was quiet for a moment before answering. "That depends on what you want to happen." "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said carefully, "that I'm not in the habit of kissing women I intend to walk away from." He paused. "Unless that's what you'd prefer." Virginia's heart quickened. "No," she said quietly. "That's not what I'd prefer." She felt, rather than saw, his smile. "Good, because I've grown rather fond of your company, Virginia Zeller." "And I yours, Beau Pearson." They crested a hill, and the sprawling settlement of Helena came into view. In the valley below, a proper town with sturdy buildings, church steeples, and the unmistakable signs of prosperity from the nearby gold mines. "It's larger than I expected," Virginia remarked. "Mining town," Beau explained. "Started with gold, but there's silver too, and other opportunities. It's civilized enough to have law and order, wild enough to allow folks to make their own way." As they approached the outskirts of town, Virginia became increasingly aware of her appearance barefoot, dressed in men's clothing several sizes too large, her hair a tangled mess despite her best efforts to tame it with her fingers. What would the townspeople think of her? More importantly, what would they think of Beau for bringing such a disreputable-looking woman into their midst? Beau seemed to sense her discomfort. "There's a widow woman I know, Mrs. Callahan, runs a boarding house on the edge of town. Decent sort, doesn't ask too many questions. We'll go there first, get you situated properly before facing the rest of Helena." The plan was sensible, and Virginia felt a rush of gratitude for his thoughtfulness. As they rode down the main street, she kept her head high despite the curious glances from passers-by. Beau's solid presence behind her gave her strength she hadn't known she possessed. Mrs. Callahan proved to be exactly as Beau had described, a practical, no-nonsense woman in her 50s who took one look at Virginia and ushered her inside without a word about her unusual attire. "Beau Pearson, you always did have a knack for finding trouble," the widow said, though her tone was fond rather than accusatory. "Get this girl inside before the whole town starts gossiping." In the privacy of Mrs. Callahan's kitchen, Virginia gave a heavily edited version of her flight from Silverrock and Beau's timely rescue. The older woman listened without interruption, then nodded decisively. "You'll stay here until you get your bearings," she said. "I've got a spare room, and I could use help with the cooking and cleaning for the other boarders." She cast an appraising eye over Virginia. "And we'll need to get you some proper clothes. Can't have you walking around Helena and Beau's cast-offs, though they suit you better than they ought to." Virginia blushed at this frank assessment, but agreed readily to the arrangement. Mrs. Callahan showed her to a small but clean room at the back of the house, then left her with a basin of warm water, soap, and a simple dress that would do for now. The luxury of washing away days of travel was almost overwhelming. Virginia scrubbed her skin until it glowed pink, washed her hair thoroughly, and put on the borrowed dress with profound gratitude. When she emerged, feeling human again for the first time since fleeing Silverrock, she found Beau waiting in the kitchen, looking somewhat cleaner himself. His eyes widened slightly at her transformation, a smile spreading across his face. "There you are," he said simply. Virginia felt herself blush again under his appreciative gaze. Mrs. Callahan, bustling about preparing dinner, made a sound that might have been a snort or a laugh. "I'll be needing your help with these potatoes, Miss Zeller," the widow said pointedly. "And Beau, If you're staying for dinner, make yourself useful and bring in more firewood. The domestic scene was so normal, so far removed from the dangers of the past few days, that Virginia found herself smiling as she picked up a knife and began peeling potatoes. This was a glimpse of what ordinary life could be, should be working alongside people who respected and valued her. Over dinner, Beau explained his business with rancher Whitcomb, whose property lay a few miles outside town. "I'll ride out there tomorrow," he said. "Should take a few days to locate and assess the Mustang herd he's interested in." "And then?" Virginia couldn't help asking. Beau met her eyes across the table. "And then I thought I might stick around Helena for a while. Seems like a good place to win her over." His meaning was clear in his steady gaze. Mrs. Callahan cleared her throat. "There's a school board meeting next week," she said to Virginia. "They've been looking for a qualified teacher since old Mr. Hopkins took ill last spring. Might be worth your while to introduce yourself." Virginia's spirit lifted at the prospect. "I would very much like that," she said. "Thank you, Mrs. Callahan." After dinner, Beau reluctantly prepared to leave for the livery stable where he would spend the nights before heading to Whitcomb's ranch. "I'll be back in 3 days, 4 at most," he said as they stood on Mrs. Callahan's porch. The widow had tactfully busied herself inside, giving them a moment of privacy. "Will you be all right here?" Virginia nodded. "Mrs. Callahan has been most kind, and I believe I'll inquire about the teaching position tomorrow." "Good," Beau said. He hesitated, then reached out to take her hand. "Virginia, I want you to know that what happened between us, it wasn't just circumstance or convenience." "I know," she said softly. "For me either." He smiled, lifting her hand to press a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Then I'll see you in a few days, schoolteacher." Virginia watched him walk down the street toward the livery, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. In just 3 days, her life had been completely upended, and yet, somehow, set right at the same time. Mrs. Callahan appeared beside her, offering a shawl against the evening chill. "He's a good man, that one," the widow said. "Not many like him left out here." "No," Virginia agreed. "I don't imagine there are." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Virginia met with the school board, who were impressed by her credentials and desperate enough for a teacher that they overlooked her lack of references from Silverrock. She was offered the position on the spot, with classes to begin the following Monday. Mrs. Callahan helped her acquire suitable clothing and introduced her to other respectable women in town, carefully managing the story of Virginia's arrival to minimize gossip. By the time Beau returned from Whitcomb's ranch, Virginia had established herself as Helena's new school teacher and was beginning to feel at home in the bustling town. Their reunion was witnessed by too many eyes for more than a brief handshake and exchange of pleasantries on the street, but the warmth in Beau's eyes told Virginia all she needed to know. That evening, with Mrs. Callahan's blessing, Beau escorted Virginia to dinner at Helena's Best restaurant, a far cry from their meals beside campfires, but no less intimate for the civilized surroundings. "Whitcomb wants me to bring in that Mustang herd before winter sets in," Beau told her. "Offered me a good price, plus a cabin on his property and steady work breaking horses if I want it." "That sounds promising," Virginia said carefully. "It's about 5 miles from town," he continued. "Not too far for a man to ride in occasionally, to call on a certain schoolteacher perhaps." Virginia smiled. "I imagine such a schoolteacher might welcome those visits." Beau reached across the table to take her hand. "I'm not much for rushing things, Virginia, but I want you to know that I intend to court you properly, if you'll allow it." "I would like that very much," she replied, her heart full to bursting. The weeks that followed were filled with the sweet, unhurried rhythm of courtship. Beau called on Virginia regularly, escorting her to church socials and community gatherings. They took Sunday afternoon rides into the countryside, sometimes returning to the spot where they had sheltered during the storm, their cave, as they had come to think of it. Virginia thrived as Helena's schoolteacher, earning the respect of parents and the affection of her pupils. The town embraced her as one of their own, and if anyone suspected the true nature of her arrival, they were kind enough to keep such suspicions to themselves. As winter gave way to spring, Beau's visits to town became more frequent. He had proven his worth to rancher Whitcomb and had been given more responsibility and with it, more freedom to manage his own time. On a perfect April evening, with wildflowers carpeting the meadows around Helena, Beau took Virginia riding to a hilltop overlooking the town. There, with the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, he asked her to be his wife. "I know I'm not the kind of man your parents probably imagined for you," he said, holding both her hands in his. "I have no fortune, no education to speak of. But I love you, Virginia Zeller. I've loved you since that first night by the campfire, when you looked at me without fear despite everything you'd been through." Tears filled Virginia's eyes. "And I love you, Beau Pearson. You saw me at my worst and treated me with dignity when I had nothing to offer in return. I can imagine no better man to spend my life with." They were married in June in Helena's small church, with Mrs. Callahan standing proudly in place of Virginia's distant parents. The entire town turned out for the celebration, embracing the union of their respected schoolteacher and the honorable cowboy who had won her heart. Beau had spent the spring preparing the cabin on Whitcomb's property, expanding it from a simple one-room structure to a proper home with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a small parlor where Virginia could continue tutoring children too far from town to attend regular school. On their wedding night, as they stood on the porch of their new home, watching the stars emerge above the Montana wilderness, Virginia thought back to that desperate flight from Silverrock nearly a year before, barefoot, dress torn, certain she would die alone in the wilderness. "What are you thinking about?" Beau asked, his arms encircling her from behind. "About how sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best," she replied, leaning back against his chest. "If I hadn't fled that night, if you hadn't found me—" "I would have found you eventually," he said with quiet certainty. "Some people are meant to find each other, no matter what paths they take." Virginia turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to touch his beloved face. "I believe you're right, Mr. Pearson." "I usually am, Mrs. Pearson," he replied with a smile, bending to kiss his wife as the last light of day faded from the Montana sky. 2 years later, Virginia stood on that same porch, cradling their infant daughter as she watched Beau return from checking their small herd of horses. They had built a good life together. Virginia continued teaching in town 3 days a week, while Beau had gradually established his own modest horse breeding operation, with Whitcomb's blessing and support. Their daughter, Catherine, named for Beau's long-lost sister, had her mother's dark hair and her father's steady gaze. At 6 months old, she was already showing signs of her parents' determination and strength. As Beau dismounted and climbed the steps to join his family, Virginia felt the same surge of love and gratitude that had become familiar yet never diminished. From the darkest night of her life had come this man, this love, this family proof that even in the harshest wilderness, beauty could take root and flourish. "Welcome home," she said, leaning up to kiss him as their daughter reached for her father's familiar beard. "Best words in the English language," Beau replied, gathering his wife and child close as the Montana sunset painted the sky in the same fiery hues that had illuminated their first days together, days that had changed everything and given them both a love as vast and enduring as the western horizon.